Today I'm joined by Matthew Bierlein, right? You're running for Michigan State Senate District 26?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And what's the office you hold right now?
Currently I'm the state representative in the 97th district, so that's parts of, it's about half of Tuscola County. Unionville to Caro comes over, it's Vassar, Millington, Akron, Fairgrove, Reese, and Wisner. And then Saginaw County portions are Birch Run over to Frankenmuth, up across, it kind of goes, wraps around the north of the city. So Zilwaukee over to Freeland, and then up into, I have one township in Bay County, Auburn and Williams Township, and then two halves of townships in Genesee County, parts of Montrose and Vienna Township, kind of north of Vienna Road.
What made you decide to run for this office? And when did you decide to do it?
For the Senate seat?
Yeah.
Probably about, so I'm in my second term in the House, probably about halfway through the first year of this term. So July, June, sometime in there, started having conversations with, so there's two other state representatives that live in the district, Representative Martin and Representative Green. We kind of started to have some conversations about, is one of us interested in running? Nobody wants a, this bloody primary between three sitting state reps. Right. And Representative Green said, he could only serve one term if he was to run because of the time that he's already been in. Representative Martin could serve one term, wouldn't have been able to serve both. And so we just kind of talked about, what does that look like? I have the opportunity to serve two terms if I was to win. And I'm passionate that Lansing needs more, we need more experience from our legislators, because when you don't have that legislative experience, you rely on lobbyists and central staff. And so I was adamant that whoever is the next state senator should have a background, have experience, and be able to go in and serve with some kind of hit the ground running versus spend the first 2 years, getting educated by people who the public have pretty much said, we don't want those people educating you. We want you to know.
Do you see that in Lansing a lot? Yeah, are there people that go in fairly inexperienced and then are trying to learn on the fly?
Yeah, I think term limits, the way that were set up, led to more of that. You had this constant churn of people, and so and I think it affected kind of every level of government. So if you have state reps who had to leave after 6 years, no matter what, you have these open spots all the time. And so where do those people come from? Well, we're going down and we're kind of picking out who's the next best county commissioner, or who's the next best township supervisor. And they keep taking people who are doing a really good job where they're at and kind of moving them out of government. And it's kind of the one place where we think experience is a bad thing. We don't want career politicians, and I would say we don't want career politicians, but we do want experience.
Then what are your thoughts on term limits? Like, if it were up to you, how would we handle that?
I think the new change that we did was a good change. So in 22, it was on the ballot to change Michigan's term limits from 3 2-year terms in the House and 2 4-year terms in the Senate. So if you were to serve 6 and 8, you could have had 14 years to 12 years, but you can serve them anywhere and in any combination. So if you wanted to spend 6 2-year terms in the House, you could do that. And I think that was a good change. I think we've seen some of that change in Lansing this term, especially in the House, where you have people who are now in their 4th term for the first time since term limits went into effect. And those people are very knowledgeable about the committees they're on, about the topics they're working on. And it's not people who in their last term, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do when they're not elected anymore in a few months. And there's a new group of people who just came in who are trying to learn, well, I'm going to be in charge of all of this next year. How do I learn that now? And so I think the term limit changes have been actually beneficial to the state of Michigan.
So it allows for more continuity without extending the amount of time that one might serve overall in office.
And I think that was a good change. And I think the biggest piece that we're going to see, and this will take a couple of, I think still a few more years, but you got elected as a state rep, and you go in and you're there for 2 years, and you're figuring out how to govern. And then the next 2 years, maybe you're the chair of a committee, and now you're working with a department, and you're trying to change something with an appointed bureaucrat who could be there for 30 years. And by the time you get through that first term where you were actually the chair of something, and you go into what was your last term, they say, you're done in 2 years. I'm going to be here for another 20. I don't really have to listen to you.
Yeah, you get marginalized.
Now you can stay. You could be there for half of their career. Mm-hmm. You could actually have to work with these people, and it makes those relationships actually work better when you know from the bureaucratic side, they know what they're getting from their legislators, and from the legislators, they know that they actually know what they're doing, and they know what they're talking about, and they can hold bureaucrats accountable. And I think that's going to be good for the state of Michigan.
What are the issues that you think are facing District 26?
Certainly at doors, the thing we hear the most about is affordability right now. Affordability, and then I would also say changes at the state level around energy zoning. These are the things that I hear the most when knocking doors. So affordability is a mix of things. It's property taxes. We certainly hear a lot about property taxes. It's gas, it's energy, it's groceries, it's all of the things that we think about that we have to pay for on a daily basis. The cost of housing, people not being able to downsize because the cost of a house is so much money, or not, and then those houses aren't available for younger families to upsize. And so we hear a lot about that, and I think that's probably statewide. That's the number one issue, is that affordability piece. And then from the energy zoning portion of it, we live, the 26th district is a very rural district with some small and what I would say Lapeer and Davison are bigger towns, because I grew up in Vassar.
Sure.
You get outside of this area and people wouldn't call those big towns. But,
what is the largest town in this district?
I think it is Lapeer.
Is it Lapeer?
Yeah.
Which has about 9,000.
Yeah. So like in my house district, Frankenmuth is the largest city, and it's 5,000 people.
Yeah.
So yeah, Lapeer is the single largest municipality in that breakdown.
Okay. Is there work already being done in Lansing on this housing affordability issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple pieces of it. When we talk about housing affordability, there's different parts that people are talking about, so we have to be speaking the same language. So are we talking about the affordability to build a new house? Are we talking about the affordability to where are interest rates, and where can you buy a new house or buy an existing house? And then the other piece of that is property taxes, and can you afford those new property taxes? Because the cost of the house is so high, it's going to become uncapped when it changes hands. On the building a new house piece, we need more stock in the marketplace to lower the cost of housing. So from the building side, if you talk to the Home Builders Association, they'll say it's around $120,000 of every house is government regulation. That breaks down into multiple different things, whether it's some local zoning requirements, whether it's the cost of new building codes and how that goes onto it, new infrastructure. But just as an example, if you live in a township that has a 50-foot setback requirement versus a township with a 100-foot setback requirement, and those exist, that 50 feet of driveway makes it added to the cost. So that's where they would say there's $120,000 government regulation costs. The conversation about how do we fix that is where even within my own Republican caucus that we don't always agree on. And so do I think Lansing should come in and say, hey, every township, you can't have more than a 25-foot setback? No, I don't think that's Lansing's role. There's a reason most people choose to live in the communities they do. And despite not liking government overreach, a lot of it has to do with the way that community is planned and zoned. You choose to live there because of certain things happening in the community, and it doesn't necessarily happen freely, right? Mm-hmm. So we live in a township that has a pretty decent setback and a certain amount of road frontage, and we like it because we like having the space. I like living where I can't see my neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody likes that, and density is where you do get the most affordability, and it's actually where you get the most breakdown in value for property taxes. So from a local unit of government standpoint, when they can increase density, they benefit from it, and so do the public. But it's still, I don't think it's Lansing's role to do that. Then there's other pieces too, and this is the overall regulation that goes into everything we do as a state that raises the cost of goods, services, infrastructure. We have a rules committee this term, and we haven't had a rules committee before. And so kind of any new legislation that's going to have rules promulgated by the department, whatever department that is, whether it's Health and Human Services or LARA or DNR, it goes through this rules committee, and they evaluate kind of how specific are we in what rules can be promulgated. Because what we've seen is we pass a law, it does go to the departments because they have to enforce the rules. They promulgate rules. Those rules are not in line with the intention of the law, but there's no legislative recourse except to pass a new law. And so we're trying to be much more proactive in that. The rules committee was also tasked with doing, we called it the red tape reduction. So they kind of started at it was a little dramatic. They came into committee with a stack of all of the LARA regulations, and it was 9 feet tall, and it's thousands and thousands of papers, and these are just all of the rules that businesses have to comply with that are promulgated by the department or outside of the law. And so going through those and trying to step things back or look at and see where we can combine licensing. For instance, if we have 9 licenses for Boilermakers in the state of Michigan, Ohio has 3. We were able to take what Ohio has, meet with the folks who actually have those licenses, and we were able to get ours down to, I think, 5 or maybe it's 4. But just where does it make sense to cut the red tape, reduce the overhead, and open up that marketplace? So those are the kind of things that we've been working on to try and lower, like, just the housing costs.
Sure. Okay. One thing I hear about, well, you talked about energy too. It's the second half of your answer, right? So data answers, or data centers, super hot topic right now.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts, first off, on them in general, right?
Yeah. I've been asked this question before, so we did talk about it a little bit at the Tea Party, Meet the Candidates. So it's data centers are happening throughout the country, lots of places. I think Michigan has 2 active permits, or maybe it's just 1 active permit, where like Ohio has 50, Virginia is in like 130, Texas is around 100. Wow. So they're happening in a lot of places. The president has said this is a national security issue. If we don't store our data here, it's going to be stored overseas, and then it's much more vulnerable. That said, I think this comes back to, as I mentioned, I think it's more of a local issue than people want it to be. There's a lot of people who don't want locals to make this decision. They think the state should. I disagree with that. I don't think a committee chair from Macomb County or a committee chair from even Grand Rapids or that area should be telling people in the 26th district where they should put things. And that's been the argument with wind and solar. And I think with data centers, that's still the same argument. That decision needs to be made at a local level. If a local community says, hey, we want this, we know it's not gonna bring a ton of long-term jobs, but there's gonna be construction jobs, there's gonna be economic impact through property taxes. Maybe there's some good neighbor agreements like they have with wind and solar, where some of the surrounding people get some sort of payment for having to put up with having this next door. I think that piece of it should be left at a local level.
So you mentioned national security, and then you mentioned the sort of incentives there. What is the argument, or the best argument you tend to hear for those who do want data centers? Because definitely around here, it's a very strong anti-data center sentiment. Like here just passed a 1-year moratorium on that, right? And you pointed out the numbers in comparison with Ohio, and was it West Virginia?
It's Virginia. Virginia is kind of like the data center capital of the United States.
Why might a community actually want one?
The jobs that are there typically, there's going to be an instant economic impact with construction jobs, but those fade,
Right.
those go away. The long-term jobs will be relatively small. There will be, my biggest thing would probably be, you're going to see other economic impact as a result of, and it's not necessarily jobs that are going to support the data center or be supported by a data center. It's infrastructure upgrades that the data center would be required to do will have a trickle-out effect for, like, hey, if we want a manufacturing facility, we need a lot of energy and energy reliability. And the current Michigan law says if a data center wants to take advantage of the tax credits, they can have a sales tax credit for equipment and build out, and it's the same sales tax credit that most major manufacturers have the option to take advantage of. But they also have to build out their own energy infrastructure. They have to, the cost of adding a data center to the grid cannot be passed on to residential consumers, and that's currently in the law. So if they build that out, and you have a new transformer, and you have new energy, and you have these things, that lends to allowing other manufacturing or other commercial industry to come in that area. I would, from a perspective of how does that benefit, I think that's the biggest benefit, that a community could say, yeah, we'll take this, or that's good for us.
Okay. Do you know what Michigan state flower is?
Michigan state flower. Gosh, I don't know that. Cherry blossom?
I don't know either. Some people would say the pothole, right?
Okay.
Are you guys doing any work in Lansing? I mean, this is a refrain we hear all the time. People hate the roads in Michigan.
Yeah.
I know they're tough to stay on top of, but what are your thoughts there?
So last year, and through the budget process and through the negotiation process, there was major road funding shifts. The way that roads are funded in Michigan right now is through Act 51. So Act 51 takes the tax that you pay at the gas pump, and it distributes that out three ways. It goes half to the state, or maybe 40% to the state, and then it breaks down the rest, and it's between counties and cities.
Sure.
And then counties are responsible for fixing what would be non-city local roads with a match from the township that they're in. That was 32 cents. It was the gas tax. Then in Michigan, we paid sales tax on top of the gas tax, and so that tax fluctuated with the price of gas. So if gas is $3 a gallon, you were paying the 6 cents times 3, 20, 18 cents per gallon. And then that would be added on. And so you would never see that sales tax. It's not like it rings up separately. It was just included, and that never went, none of that money goes to roads. Sales tax is distributed through different accounts. It's constitutional. Some of it goes to schools, some of it goes to local units of government, some of it goes to a public safety trust fund. So what we did in the last budget cycle is we eliminated sales tax from your gasoline, and then we took a 3-year average of what gas was costing and what we were paying in sales tax, and then added that back into as a straight gas tax. So the gas tax went up about 20 cents and sales tax was eliminated. All of that new funding, that 20-ish, 21 cents per gallon, it skips the state and just goes through the local piece of it. So it just goes to counties and it just goes to cities to be able to fix, we call them the driveway to highway miles.
Okay.
We need to concentrate on those local road miles. That funding will become available for the first time this October. That's when the first payment, so it just started January 1st. Payments will go out in October, and they'll go to counties and cities. One of the pieces of that, so when a county goes to fix a local road in a township, there's a township match that is required right now. For the new funding, it's not required that they be able to have a match. So that was part of it that we really wanted to emphasize.
An incentive to match if they can.
Absolutely, because
Okay.
if they can match,
They'll
then
get more.
they'll usually be able to get more done.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. You mentioned schools.
Yep.
Let's talk about schools a little bit. What are some of the challenges? Michigan's doesn't have a great reputation nowadays for our education.
Right.
Right. We're falling behind. We have for a long time.
Rank in the low 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are your thoughts overall on that? How did this happen, and what do we need to do going forward?
I think it certainly happened over time. It wasn't just one day we stopped doing something. I don't know if the right answer, I think first of all, the number one answer is we need more parental involvement. No one necessarily needs to be a helicopter parent, but when it comes to your kid's education, we absolutely, we have to have that parental involvement. And we need that parental involvement in the schools, and the schools need to also allow for that, right? Sometimes there's a pushback, parents ask questions, well, you don't need to know that, or we're the experts at this, but they're first and foremost, the responsibility of raising my children falls to me and my wife. It doesn't fall to the school or the state. And so allowing for that back and forth involvement and answering questions, but everybody needs to be able to have a respectful conversation too. The second piece of it that I think has been where the state's been able to take the most action the quickest is in reading and how we're teaching kids to read. So if you have a reading problem, it's going to be harder and harder to learn going forward. And the age where you kind of switch from learning to read to reading to learn is that 3rd to 4th grade. So by 4th grade, you're required to read things to be able to learn what you're doing. And if you're struggling, it just is a continued setback. You and I, we look to be about the same age. We probably learned how to read with phonics. Sound out the words. This is the sound it makes. Not always great for spelling, but when you get to those higher levels of reading, you know how to sound out the words, put things together, and get through that. My kids learned how to read with sight words. So you get a flashcard, 3 and 4 letter words, you memorize the word. When you see it in a book, you know what it says. That's great for 3 and 4 letter words, but then if we don't go through the process of teaching them how to make those sounds and put them together separately moving forward, then it becomes a struggle. The state last year adopted, through the budget process, changes to the way that teachers are going to be educated on how to teach reading. So we went from, sometimes it gets called letters or the science of reading. And this is what Mississippi did to change around their education system.
Where I graduated from high school.
Did you really?
I did.
Okay. Well, this is what they did to change their rankings and to move up towards the top, as they went to this science of reading, where we're back to phonics and we're teaching kids to sound things out and
when did
how to
we
put
go
it
away
all
from
together.
that? You know?
I'm not really sure when.
Sure.
I've been out of school 26 years.
Yeah, I don't necessarily expect you to be a historian on that, but
Yeah.
I was curious if you knew.
So that we made that change. The implementation date was I think 2028. We actually, in this year's budget, we moved up that implementation date. So we can't wait. We need to do that now. And there's funding in the budget to put tutors who have been trained on these new methods into the schools and get the kids moving and going right away. And then any new teachers coming in are going to have been trained in this already. And then through their continuing education programs and teacher in services, this will be something that's added to everything. And having the teachers properly trained and supporting them is a huge part of this. Our teachers can read. They probably learned how to do that. I don't think it's going to be a huge transition. It's just it's a change in the direction that they've been asked to do things. So somewhere, maybe 20-ish years ago, 15 years ago, somebody came through and said, this is the right way to do it and this is what we should do. And that just hasn't really worked out for us. So let's go back to what we know works.
Yeah, interesting. And it'll be interesting to see once those changes are implemented, how long it takes before we can start measuring the results. But
reading, if you have to read, we didn't have a lot of books in my house growing up, but I could rollerblade to the library, and I spent a lot of time in the library, and I actually I credit it with where I am today, is just being an avid reader and being able to sit down and take in knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're on a committee, and man, my handwriting is really small, but it has to do with like mental and behavioral health, right? Are you not?
I chair the Oversight Subcommittee on Public Health and Food Security.
Okay,
And that's where we've done all of that work.
Yeah, okay, great. So what other kind of work then have you done? Getting away from education a little bit, let's talk about like, there's a lot. So I'm in recovery.
Okay.
And there's a lot of mental health challenges in our society today. You can look at COVID, again, being from Lapeer, we were known for Oakdale. You don't see the psychiatric hospitals like you used to, the drug epidemic. There's a lot going on with all that. So what is your insight into just, or overview, I should say, of that?
Yeah, so the Oversight Committee that I chair, so we're not a policy committee, but it's our job to dive in and look at what's going wrong, put together that information, and then kind of present it to folks who want to work on the policy side. And I've done some of that policy stuff myself as a result of what's come out of these meetings and these committee hearings. So we started working on this issue. So that, I'm from Tuscola County, and we have the Caro Center, and it's the northernmost state psychiatric facility in the state of Michigan. Michigan drastically lags behind national average on available beds for psychiatric patients. We have, if you count the state beds and private beds that are available, we're around 19 per 100,000 people. The national average is 40, the gold standard is 50, so we're like half of the national average.
Right.
That's a result of, I think, a few things. It's state disinvestment from mental health. We had problems administering it back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and instead of trying to fix those problems, the answer was let's close facilities and push this out into the private market. What we've seen from the private market is these folks want to help, but they also have a responsibility to like their employees and to be able to provide good care for the folks that they can, keep their employees safe and keep patients safe. And so they don't necessarily cover the most acute situations. So they can bring somebody in, but if that person is, has a severe disability and becomes violent, they're not equipped to handle that person. And so they either wind up in our jail system or they're in an ER and they're waiting for access to one of those state forensic or acute systems, and it can be a long wait. The bigger overarching issue around all of the mental health is I think there's still just a really big lack of understanding from a societal place. Everybody understands the need for hospitals at any time. Like you could be in a car accident, you could get sick, you could get the flu, grandma's been in the hospital, you went to the hospital to have your babies. Everybody understands the need for medical services. So much of mental health is hidden and kept secret. Families don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about, the uncle that had an issue, or they hide their own mental health because they don't know how it's going to be perceived. And so because of that, people don't relate to it unless they've gone through it. And so it's harder to find that kind of overarching societal support for something that people don't understand. But you mentioned it being in recovery. We know that when people have untreated mental health, they self-medicate. So they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they wind up in our jail system or in our ERs, and none of those places are designed to do that work.
Right.
And so those are things that we've been working on. We had, I think, 6 weeks of policy or oversight hearings just on this topic, and the lowest hanging fruit that came out of that, because most of it just costs a lot of money to fix. And so the lowest hanging fruit was, we talked about with the private facilities, there is the way that we license the beds. They're either licensed for adult use or they're licensed for pediatric use. And you can have a facility that has beds that are licensed in both ways. They're sectioned off and they have rules that they follow. We have the data that shows during times of year when school is not in session, so summer, Christmas break, spring break, those time periods, there is much less need for adolescent beds. So whether school is just very stressful, or maybe we're missing reporting, whatever that situation is, we have beds that sit empty, 6 weeks of the summer, and then there's a backlog of adults that need beds. And so one of the things that, piece of legislation, moving through, it's gone through the committee process, it's sitting, hopefully we'll get it out of the House when we come back after the primary election. It allows for those beds to flex if they're sitting empty.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't allow you to take kids out and put adults in.
Right.
And you still
Just
have to follow
allows you to
all
take
of the same
better
rules.
advantage of empty beds.
Yes.
In general,
Yep.
instead of
Yep.
just letting them go empty.
Yeah, so we're just trying to do everything we can to improve access.
Excellent. So we live in a pretty rural
Yeah.
part of the state, as we talked about, right? So like agriculturally speaking,
Mhm.
what are the concerns we see in our district that you're trying to address?
So certainly, the input cost for ag is a huge driver right now, whether it's fuel or fertilizer. Anything we can do to try and stabilize those things. I know in Michigan, we're looking at being able to open like a new potash plant or things like that to be able to bring in lower input costs for what the farmers need. The other thing is treating agriculture like the skilled trade that it is, and getting that support system back into the school districts. It was growing up in a rural small town. We didn't have a AA chapter or anything, even in my own school, and it was very much that late 90s where there was a really big push to push everybody into college, and I think that was a mistake. That hindsight is always 20/20, and it's easy to look back and say that college wasn't for everybody, and we probably missed some really good opportunities for people. But I think making sure that we're supporting agriculture at multiple different levels, whether it's making sure that the departments they work with are serving them appropriately, whether it's providing the next generation of farmers and farm workers that training they need to be able to kind of hit the ground running, whether it's through a tech center or an in-school program, and then doing the things that we can to protect their access to land and property. That goes back to some of those energy questions in wind and solar, and the way that the state is forcing utility companies through policy to add wind and solar, mostly solar now. Wind has kind of played itself out, but forcing them to go into solar. Well, where's the easiest place to put solar? The easiest place is on open farm fields. It's not the right policy. It's and when the way that the system is set up, when the utility company is forced to do it because of a state law, and then it doesn't matter what they pay for it, because the law also says whatever your costs are, you just take that back to the Public Service Commission, and they have to change the rates to reflect what your costs are. They can pay thousands of dollars an acre when the farmer can only, or a property owner can only lease that out for a couple $100 an acre. And so it really has changed just the way that agriculture looks at their land and their farmland, and we have to get back to making some business decisions instead of emotional decisions when it comes to energy production and the way that that's affecting, especially our landscape. I mean, the rural areas around here have been hit much harder than a lot of other parts in the state because of the ITC line that runs through the thumb, and access to that line, and we're still seeing the effects of it. It's been almost 20 years.
So I solicited questions from the audience,
Yeah.
right? So I have a handful of these. Just see that. Gotta sort through him. Oh, okay, or sort through them. So one we have from Terry Woodcox, right? So Terry wants to know how you would work to make housing more affordable. We talked about this a little bit, without placing unnecessary burdens on property owners. And what would you do to address the cost of groceries, utilities, and healthcare for Michigan families?
So I think all of this starts with it's kind of back to that regulation layer that the state has over everything. And some of it's at the state level, some of it's at the federal level. And some regulations are there to try and keep people safe. We have building codes for a certain reason. Over time, we've said, hey, if we do it this way, it's bad. If we do it this way, it's good. So we're going to make you do it this way. But there's this level of regulation that only adds overhead. And that never seems to go away, right? We can go back and forth and argue about the way that the farmer gets this much, the grocery store gets this much, the transportation company gets this much with your grocery costs, but then how much of all of the things that they had to do to get it to that shelf on the grocery store also had some sort of regulation from the state over top of it that just adds to the cost. And that just it never seems to get smaller. And that's one of the things that we've been really fighting for in the House, is making that regulatory level smaller, in a way that makes sense. It doesn't, change public health. And I think it's so hard to put actual dollars on some of it. I see it, in healthcare. I see it in healthcare all the time. Here's a new rule that you have to follow. And so now, instead of providing medicine, the doctor has to take a nurse who was taking care of patients off the floor and put them in an office to check all of these boxes to make sure that they get paid by the insurance company or by Medicare or by Medicaid, whoever that is. Well, what do you think that did to the cost of your healthcare if you have a whole employee now just doing overhead work,
right,
just paperwork? And I think that it's at every level we see that. Every time there's one of these new burdens put on a business, and whether that business is building a house, providing healthcare, getting gas to the gas station, every time it's a tax. It really is a tax, and it's a tax that's paid by people. We talk about taxes all the time, whether businesses should pay more taxes, and I always tell people, businesses write a check for taxes, but businesses don't pay taxes. That's part of their overhead, it's part of their operational cost. Their customers pay those taxes in the price of the goods. So if you raise the taxes on a business, you're just raising the price on every customer.
Yeah. Matty Blanco is concerned, and I hear this where I live in Lapeer a lot. He's concerned about recidivism, and particularly among sex offenders. I know that's a tough one, right?
No, I don't think it's a tough one.
Well, I mean, it might be a tough one to I should say that's a broad.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I've actually I have legislation that passed the House earlier this year. Was the issue of recidivism was brought to me by a group of constituents, and they told me of a situation, and it was a gentleman who's been convicted, did his time, is on the registry, and the only real restrictions for employment are you can't work in the school. It's one of the few places that you can't work. Now there are great community organizations who do background checks on all their volunteers and things like that to make sure that they're operating safely. But in this case, the gentleman started his own karate school and advertised mostly to children. And you've got a business. You as a parent, you say, hey, well, this is business. They're doing karate. He's already got some students. And then a couple months into it, one of the parents runs a search, or somebody runs a search just to see are there any new offenders in the area. And lo and behold, it's the karate teacher. So there is no law stopping him from doing that. There's no rules. He didn't break any rules or laws. So we introduced legislation that would say if you are currently on the registry, you cannot have a job that works primarily with kids. It doesn't put the onus on a business to run a background check and do all of these things, and make sure that, you're not doing
The
this.
individual should know.
The individual person who committed the crime should bear the burden of following the rules. And because it would become a new law, there are consequences to breaking it. So if you violate that law, you go back to jail.
Sure.
Right? And that's the way that it should be. Recidivism on sex offenders, especially sex offenders against children, is some of the highest recidivism rates in the nation. The way that they're measured, there's usually like it shows by time, and so there's a small window where it's very low. Well, that's because you're in jail. Like 0 to 5 years, it's really low.
For sure.
The 5 to 10, it starts to creep up, and then after 10 years, the recidivism rate, actually male on boy crime is the worst, but it is in the 30% range.
Wow.
I mean, that's really high.
That's really high.
And so we need, things like the law that I've proposed. We're trying to work with the state police and the Senate to make it enforceable. Right now, there's some questions because how do we enforce it, and or defining certain things, like what does primarily work with children mean? How much of a time frame is that?
It's so interesting you bring that up, because in Lapeer a couple years ago we had a exotic pet store open, and I believe there might have been a location around here, and that was their second location, and the owner of that store was on the registry.
Okay.
Now, again, most of your clientele, or a lot of your clientele, if you're a pet store,
minors,
you're gonna attract a lot of kids, right?
Yeah.
Even if just something to do after school when you're walking around Lapeer, let's go in, and part of the whole sales pitch, or I should say business strategy perhaps, is you could go in and like play with these animals that you otherwise would never be able to. And there were a lot of issues. There were I don't know, PETA had a problem because they would have like moles out during the day. It just wasn't good for the animals.
Yeah.
But some loss in all that was, yes, we have children now, and do the parents in our community know what's happening here?
The example that I always try to use is like a Chuck E. Cheese. Okay, there's no law right now stopping somebody who's been convicted of being a pedophile from working at Chuck E. Cheese. Now, I wouldn't want to work there personally. It's not my thing. But maybe making those pizzas in the back room is the only job somebody who's been convicted could get. We're not trying to stop that person from having a job. But if your job is to directly work with the kids, then the answer should be no. And then the other, so it's trying to find the right way to define things. Primarily works with kids unsupervised. Like in the case of the karate school, where parents drop their kids off, go run a couple of errands, come back to pick them up. So anytime that we can do things to keep kids safe seems like the right time to do something to me.
Yeah, definitely. Colleen Adams wants to know what you'll do for small business owners who have trouble hiring due to tax burdens.
Yeah, so I will say the states that we see the most growth, take Tennessee for an example, right? These are really low tax states. Whether it's through personal income, so like as a small business owner, we pay our business taxes through our personal taxes at the end of the year. If you have a profit, this is how much your profit was. You have to pay your personal income tax through that profit, and that's how you pay your business taxes as a small business owner. So would it be cheaper for us to be business owners in Tennessee than here? Certainly. And so again, it's back to the things, what can we do to lower the burden? What kind of things can we do to lower that property tax burden even? Like, so as a business, you're not getting a homestead exemption, you're paying all of the property taxes. House Republicans earlier this year, we did pass out of the House, we rolled back, we would eliminate the state's portion. There's only one piece of property tax that the state collects. It's a $6 million education tax. We voted to eliminate that. That's part of our property tax plan. It's sitting in the Senate. The Senate has its own property tax plan that I believe is targeted towards low income. The governor has a property tax plan that's targeted towards seniors. Maybe this fall, hopefully, we'll be able to put some of this time together and come up with a real workable plan. I tend to lean towards ours because it affects everybody, and it should. I don't think we should go in and say, well, we're only gonna reduce property taxes for certain groups of people. I think everybody should see benefit from that if we're going to do it, but I don't disagree with Colleen at all. Michigan was a 3.95% income tax state. We raised it to 4.35 temporarily to get through some hard times, and it's gone to 4.25, and then it's never come back down. We've voted to move it down. It's been it just can't get through the whole process. But lower taxes are dollars invested back into your employees, your buildings, your community, right? Like if I have $1,000 extra that I'm not paying to the state, I have $1,000 that I can give to local sports teams. And that's, small businesses do that. They really do support the communities that support them. And definitely. So, no, I don't disagree with her, and I think that tax burden, we see the benefits of it in other states, so we know it works.
All right, this question comes from Peggy. I can't pronounce that last name. It starts with a B. Peggy B. She eats at Taco Bell 3 times a day, and she wants to know if you can assure Michigan citizens that the diarrhea lettuce outbreak is behind us.
I cannot assure anyone of that. I don't know. I have a feeling that if Taco Bell is back to serving lettuce, because I know they pulled it for a little bit, that they feel comfortable with it. I think I said the total number of outbreaks was around 7,500 in the state.
I know we're up there. Maybe you should drive to Chicago for your Taco Bell, I think, if you live in Michigan.
Yeah, or maybe just pass on the lettuce for now. No, I mean, if they're serving, they don't want to be, no business wants to be responsible for spreading any kind of illness or parasite. And so I would say if Taco Bell's back to providing lettuce, I think they feel comfortable with it. And if they're not, there's a reason they're not. Okay. So
yeah, absolutely. 2 more questions from the audience. This one is from Jeremy H. He wants to know what your favorite version of Robert's Rules of Order is.
Well, so the state doesn't actually use Robert's Rules. So I have I was a county commissioner, and we operate under Robert's Rules.
Okay.
But the state uses its own set of rules that whoever has the gavel, whoever the majority, is in control.
Okay. They can make up their own rules?
Well, you do make up a level of your own rules.
Okay.
There are rules that we adopt to govern the chamber. We use Mason's rules, and Mason's rules give a lot of authority to the presiding officer. So whether it's the speaker or the speaker pro tem, one of the associates that stands up there, and then there are 2 floor leaders, one for the majority party, one for the minority party. They are the ones who interact with the speaker or the presiding officer. If there's a point of order, somebody can raise a point of order that is the floor leader. But as a member, I can't just start yelling point of order and get to address the chamber or the body. And then you only get to speak in the chamber when you are recognized by the speaker and allowed to do so. We do not have the motion. We don't make motions that way. We don't second, even in a committee setting, we don't second motions. Say there's a motion to move the bill out of committee and to the floor, and the chair votes first, and it goes down the line through the majority party to the minority party, and there's no second. There's no I want to make this an amendment. It's very different than traditional Robert's Rules that most people see meetings run with.
Yeah, right, that's interesting. The second half of Jeremy's question is, he just tells you're wrong, and there's a lot of Spanish, so I don't know I'll just move on to the next one. That's Jacqueline Wellington asked if you can share an example of a time when listening to people with different perspectives caused you to rethink or change your position on an issue.
Yeah. So I would say on big issues where you probably have some sort of preconceived, hard line, it's less likely. So there are a lot of things that come before the body that are not, it's the work of governing and not necessarily the political stuff that divides us. And so you might not really be familiar with the topic, and then this is why we have the committee structure, and you have people who kind of specialize in certain areas. Like if somebody wants to talk about the business side of medicine, they usually come to me to ask those questions. If somebody wants to talk about how to build roads, there are people that are better at that in our caucus. Not everyone has the same skill set. And so that's why we have the committee process to work through those ideas. And then it's why we actually have our caucus meetings where we sit down and every bill that we're gonna vote on goes through the caucus. After it's already gone through the committee, it's been voted on in the committee, it's gonna be voted on the floor. We have a caucus meeting and we ask those questions and we say, hey, I don't really understand this. Can you explain that to me? Or I don't understand the technical piece of this. That seems like a new regulation. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm not for letting Laura create a new license and hire 10 new people to enforce it. Let's see how we can rework what we're currently doing. And then there's a lot of times that you think you have a really good idea, and then when you start to talk to the people who it will actually affect, they're like, so here are the problems. We like where you're headed, but let's work through the right way to implement that. And so I would say it's that piece of it happens all the time, and it's constantly happening. I could give you an example of another piece of legislation that I've been working on. We require physicians in Michigan to do continuing education to renew their licenses. Every 3 years, they're required to do 150 hours of continuing education. It is tied for the highest in the nation.
Yes, I was gonna say, that sounds like quite a bit.
Indiana requires 2 hours every 2 years.
Wow.
And Ohio is at 75, Illinois is around 120. I think Wisconsin and us are the most. Arizona, we're all at like 150 hours.
It reminds me of maybe it was the data center things we were talking about, but it is fascinating when you look at state to state regulation sometimes and how much something can vary. Not to interrupt.
No. So our physicians are already part of an interstate compact where if they are licensed in Michigan, they can operate in 30-ish other states. And vice versa. So a physician in Indiana who lives by the border can be licensed in Indiana and practice in Michigan. And they don't, we don't see, there's no data to say, oh, well, that physician screws up all the time because they only have 2 hours of continuing education. They're still required to do whatever their board certification requirements are every 3 years. They have to meet that in Indiana, in Michigan, in any state in the nation. If they want to be board certified, they still have a separate set of things to do. So I look at that and I say, this is just the state is saying we know better than the board of physicians on what you should be doing. And so why would we not want to just be Indiana and only you have to take the jurisprudence that you understand, Michigan's laws and every couple of years. Why would we not do that? And then you meet with the physician group and they're like, well, let's talk about what makes sense. And we went from, I think we should be Indiana at 2 hours to, there's one group that wanted us to go to 120 hours. And we agreed to run the bill at 75 hours. So it's half. I think we should be doing this for every profession. We should be looking at these things and seeing what we can do to adjust those numbers. Because at the end of the day, if I have a physician that has to get 150, so it's 50 hours a year of continuing education, they're not practicing medicine while they're doing that.
Right.
It costs money to the system. Someone has to track it.
Right.
Someone has to, and that creates more state overhead and bureaucracy. So But that was a time where we sat down with the group, said what actually makes sense, what is the national average, why is it there?
Yeah, and you were even kind of giving them an out, and they were like, well, maybe we shouldn't go from 150 to 2. There's a better middle ground.
There's
which
a
is
better
interesting,
middle ground. And the other part of that is sometimes you have to take what you can get as well. There are folks who will vote no every time a bill isn't perfect. Well, I don't know that I've ever seen a perfect bill. So there are folks that vote no a lot because it's not perfect. It's like, well, you know what? This is 20% better than where we are today. And when I introduce the next bill, I'm starting 20% closer to where we want to be. And it's that incremental change. It's really hard to get enough people on board to make a drastic change.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think that's one of the things that I was able to learn pretty quickly. Like if we want to make some changes, sometimes you got to chip away at those changes to get to where you can get.
That makes sense. Yeah. All right. So I think you have probably addressed this before.
Okay.
But here's your chance to do so with me, or my chance to ask you.
Yeah.
And that was to talk about Michigan Senate Bill 4.
Yeah.
Right, 2023.
Yep.
And for people who don't know, that expanded the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act,
Yes.
right? Which explicitly prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. And the reason people ask you about this is you were one of 8 Republicans to vote yes, right? This is like a Democratic, more in their wheelhouse, and you kind of broke a little bit of the party on that. Can you talk about that?
I can. So Senate Bill 4, expansion of Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act, we call it ELCRA. So there's some history first. So 2019, the conservative majority on the US Supreme Court ruled that you could not discriminate in employment for sexual preference. And that was kind of the first ruling at a national level. And it's a conservative Supreme Court that sex means all things included in sex. So if I was to say,
not just gender.
And the reasoning was, so if I'm going to hire you, I'm hiring you. But then if I'm not going to hire you because you have a same-sex partner, I'm discriminating against you. I wouldn't discriminate against you if your partner was of the opposite sex. So that's what the Supreme Court determined. A couple of years later, the state Supreme Court of Michigan used that determination as a basis to say, well, if we're not discriminating for sex because of that definition, then we can't discriminate for sex based on identity or orientation. And when we say discriminate, it has to do with employment, housing, and public accommodation. And so like public accommodation would be like, well, the building we're sitting in right now is open to the public for medical treatment, and I can't deny someone access. If I allow anybody to come in, I have to allow everybody to come in. So we're not going to deny access to a hospital. We're not going to deny access to a public park, public accommodation.
So
and that's pretty
apply
clearly
to you.
defined.
And can we talk a little bit about what this business is for
Yeah.
people who don't know?
Yeah, so it's a physical therapy clinic. We have 2 clinics. We've been doing this for 13 years. My wife's an amazing physical therapist. That's not my background is manufacturing and then organizational management. So I've just always been more on I get to do the fun stuff like clean toilets, put equipment together. And
we all have
once
our
in a while,
we're
play golf.
all on the same team, right?
Yeah. Play golf with doctors.
Great.
Those kind of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it absolutely it affects us in the way that we would do things.
And the reason I asked you to lay that out was you're saying if you let anybody in, you have to let everybody in, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is the same like if you're Walmart, same applies.
Yeah.
It's no different.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I wasn't sure if there's like a distinction because you're in this like healthcare field, but
no. So
not.
like public accommodation is very clearly defined
Okay.
as to what it is and also what it isn't. So there were 8 Republicans that voted yes. I am one of those 8. I don't believe it's the state's job. I believe it is the state's job to ensure that everyone has equal treatment under the law. I don't think it's the state's job to force. It is not the state's job to force that into anybody's moral code, their religion. There are legal exemptions for religious institutions that are clearly established through the courts, and those are all still in place. The 8 Republicans that voted yes, 4 of us all live in this what we call the Great Lakes Bay region over here in Saginaw Bay Midland. It was something that was overly expressed to everyone about the kind of community we want to have, that we should protect people's rights, and then if you disagree with somebody's lifestyle, you can still disagree with somebody's lifestyle, but that doesn't mean you should force them to be homeless because you disagree with somebody's lifestyle.
Okay.
It also, if I could,
please.
It doesn't do what some folks are claiming it does. So nowhere in the law are bathrooms. There's some folks that want to say that it lets boys in girls' bathrooms and boys in girls' sports, and that's not in the law. That's not included in public accommodation, which is, like I said, very clearly defined. There are groups who are trying to push that interpretation of it, and I would argue that they're wrong. Back to those caucus meetings, we clearly discussed this part of it in the caucus to say, does it do this? I don't think there's a single person in my party who would have voted yes if the legal interpretation is, oh yeah, it's going to let boys in the girls' bathroom.
Sure.
And then as people have tried to use that, we've passed bills out of the House that strictly prohibit those things. You're not allowed to have a boy in the girls' bathroom or locker room. And we passed
even going
bills.
that extra step legislatively.
We've taken that extra step legislatively. Now,
yeah, not only can you not interpret it this way, right? Or to disallow people from interpreting it. Yeah.
So those are things that we've tried to do in the House, and part of the reason why I think it's so important that we flip the Senate this election is so that we can move those things through the House and the Senate. I like to give people the example because I think it really lays it out there. So the MHSAA is the governing body for high school sports. They grant about 2 waivers per year to allow a boy to play a girl's sport. And they have said that they have to do that because of Elliot Larson. Mm-hmm. The MHSAA also has a very strict prohibition on, if you turn 19 before September 1st, you can't participate in your senior year of sports for the health and safety of all participants. Sure. Age is also a protected class under Elliot Larson. They are choosing how to interpret the law instead of actually following what the law says. We know that there are safety restrictions. We know what things do and don't do, and there are people who are trying to interpret things one way instead of interpreting the entire law in the right way.
Politics is something. This is what I've been learning, man. It's a nasty business sometimes, right? And
sometimes.
Yeah, and I do wonder, a lot of times you see these arguments, and are they being made in good faith? Or is this somebody that's intentionally trying to mischaracterize your motivations, whereas you're stating they were to protect people's rights, and the person making the argument that what you're doing is actually giving boys the right to use a girl's bathroom, you wonder if that's made in good faith or do they misunderstand it? And I guess you never know, but it is something.
Yeah.
So the Michigan League of Conservation Voters,
okay,
if I'm not mistaken, has given you a lifetime score of around 12%.
Oh, probably.
Familiar with this?
Not really, but
okay.
Yeah, not a big surprise.
So they view you as mostly anti-environment on their scorecard.
Okay.
What's your response?
Yeah. The things that they do to grade legislative, most Republicans probably have a similar score. Okay. Voting against mandating what did they call it? Carbon-free energy. Mm-hmm. Is a negative vote for them. any kind of vote that doesn't add more environmental regulation. So I'm an avid sportsman, love hunting, love fishing. The most active conservationists I know are all hunters and fishers. We want clean water. We want good, viable land to be able to continue to have game thrive and be productive. We live in a rural area where there's a lot of farming and a lot of agriculture and a lot of wells and septics. Like, we're following the rules to make sure that we're protecting our water and our kids' water, and farmers are doing the same things. And then a new group comes by and they'll say, oh, we've got to pass this law because we think every kid's getting poisoned by the farmer. And no, the farmer's kids are drinking that water too. But then you vote against it and say, oh, you're against conservationism. I don't buy it. And yeah, I don't buy it.
Okay. So you talk about being an avid, I forget the outdoorsman maybe.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the deer population and the tick problem that we've...
Yeah. The tick problem is something new. I'm not really, not overly familiar with it. We continue to hear it kind of the last few years. Oh, this is going to be a really bad year for ticks, and then oh, this is going to be a really bad year for ticks. And I have heard it is very. It's been a pretty aggressive year. I don't know what the solution is. Wide scale pesticides in the forest are probably not the answer.
Say less ticks sounds like the solution.
Less ticks would be the solution. I don't know how you get there.
Right.
Definitely willing to learn more.
Sure.
On that issue. The deer population. This is one that comes up all the time, and it's whether you're talking to an insurance company, whether you're talking to a farmer, whether you're talking to a hunter, and the best way to that they think to manage the game. It's been a frustrating thing as a legislator. So you get elected, your constituents send you to Lansing to do things. They call you and they tell you what they want you to do. You have things you want to do. Some of those issues align towards deer hunting or just game management in general. And then as a legislature, you pass a bill out of a chamber and it can't go anywhere. The governor's not going to sign it because the appointed NRC doesn't like it, the Natural Resources Commission.
Okay.
Now, as a state, through a ballot initiative, the citizens voted to create the NRC and to have game management done by them, to try and remove, it's supposed to be science-based, remove the emotion, well, it's really good for my district or it's really bad for my district, so we're gonna do these legislative, governmental fixes. They created the NRC. And so it can sometimes be frustrating when a constituent calls and what is going on with this? And we can reach out to them, we can ask for an explanation, but every time we've tried to legislate a change separate from what they want, it can't seem to get past the governor's desk. And so that can be pretty frustrating. When it comes to the deer population, that's one of those things that we really struggled with. We're losing hunters at a rapid rate, whether some of it's to age and young people aren't getting involved. I truly believe some of it is the continued ban on baiting. You have guys that only have the opportunity to go hunt on a weekend, and if they don't own a lot of their own property where they can put in food plots and all of these things to draw deer in, their chance was to go put out a bucket of corn and sit in a tree and hope some deer come in. Well, if they can't even do that, there's a lot of folks that they just don't buy the license. They don't go because the licenses have gotten expensive. That's one of the things I always complain about with when I was a kid. If you were going to hunt small game on your own property, you didn't have to buy a small game license, only if you were going to be out on state land or somebody else's. And then I don't remember how many years ago, but they changed it. That's not a small game license, it's a base hunting license. And you can use it to hunt small game, but you have to have that base hunting license before you go buy a deer tag. And so for me, that was just an added cost.
Right.
Now, it's a pretty small added cost to the overall
So
investment
far, though,
in
right?
hunting, but it's still, it just, all these things continue to add up. And it can be pretty frustrating from a legislative standpoint when we can listen to the constituents, we can do what they ask them to do, and we just can't get something signed because the NRC disagrees with it. And the NRC is a large committee made of people from all over the state, and it can be hard for people to engage directly with them when they want to talk to their legislator.
So yeah, in learning about you, I came across like you endorsed Governor DeSantis,
Yes.
and it seems like kind of a lot was made about that. What was your motivation? And this was like 2023. You did this.
Yeah, 23 before President Trump had announced that he was going to run again, had endorsed DeSantis with another group of legislators. I think we looked at Florida, saw all the success, saw the catalyst to that success as being Ron DeSantis, saw the growth, and just said, hey, this seems like a guy that aligns a lot with what we want to see. He's doing things at a state level that we would like to see at a national level, right? So, lower taxes, less government involved in your daily life. And so let's send him a letter saying, hey, we'd really like you to run for president. And so I signed on to that letter, and I stand by it. He was I think he would have done a great job, but he got out of the race. And when President Trump got in, I think it sucked all the wind out of everybody's sails. And it was an easy transition to go over and say, hey, okay, DeSantis is out. This is our guy. And that's politics.
Sure.
You can look at it in today's governor's race for Michigan. Really good friends with Eric Nesbitt and Tom Leonard. Would have followed either one of those guys, to all the way to the governor's office, and would have loved it. I think they're outstanding, great guys who I know on a personal level. They're both out. People endorsed one of them. Now, okay, oh man, does that mean if it's John James, does that mean John's never going to talk to me again, or I somehow don't support John because I supported somebody else first? I think endorsements usually actually mean a lot less than people want them to. So,
Sure. What are your thoughts right now on and I only have a few more for you, but on Trump, right?
Yeah.
Because in that moment, I get what you're saying. It is not that big of a deal for you to just pivot to Trump when that happened. Well, he's since been elected.
Yeah.
Right? And there are a lot of issues right now that are talking points and real issues like the economy,
Yep.
the war. What are your thoughts on how things are going in the second term so far?
I typically try to focus on state level things, but
Sure.
in this case, I think the best way to look, I think there are things that are going well that we've asked for, and there are things at a national security level that how do I personally feel about a war in Iran versus do I have the data or the knowledge or the information that any of those people have to make those decisions, to be able to say, oh, well, you're making the wrong decision. I don't get the White House daily briefing that the president gets. So it's hard for me to sit back and say, this is a huge mistake. I can't believe you're doing this, if I don't have the information that they're using to make decisions. I didn't serve in the military. I enlisted when I was 19. I was born with a heart murmur, wasn't allowed to serve because of my medical condition. But I have two older brothers who both retired out of the Army, multiple friends that have been, I don't ever want to see us go to war. But I can't sit back and criticize a war that I don't have any information on. When it comes to other Trump policies, I mean, we work with the White House. They have an Office of Intergovernmental Cooperation or Interstate Cooperation. Been to the White House for meetings a couple of times. They work with us on there are things that they can do at a federal level, and then things that we need to do at a state level to match. We work pretty closely with them on trying to reform some of this oversight stuff in the way that, fraud prevention and things like that. So, I mean, I'd say we work pretty closely with the White House, and it's been a pretty good working relationship.
So you're running to replace Kevin Daly.
Yep.
Right? He's termed out.
Yes.
You worked for him in the past.
I did.
Correct?
Yep.
What was your role when you worked for Kevin Daly?
I was a district director in constituent services, so most of the time I was back in the district having meetings with constituents when they would have state issues. It was during the COVID time, so a lot of our state issues were unemployment related. So the person that would, answering the phone, getting people entered into the system to help them kind of bridge that gap. And then a lot of, the local meetings. The senator is in session or in Lansing, and somebody needs to attend a local meeting, that would be my role.
And he endorsed gay blasting.
He did.
How do you feel about that?
I think frustrating, but also, we had a couple of conversations about it. I from the beginning of redistricting, the senator was pretty adamant that he felt like Lapeer got chopped up in a way that was not reflective of the community, and was also pretty adamant that he really wanted somebody from Lapeer to run. And so I think him supporting somebody that's from Lapeer isn't a huge shock.
Okay. So what is it that, if you get elected, that voters who send you there to Lansing, that they can count on, right? What guarantee or promise or assurance would you give those who are ready to cast their ballot for you?
Yeah. So I'm a small business owner. I have a family. I have 3 kids. My wife and I have been blessed to have 3, healthy, active kids. They're right now 13 to 9. Our family is living the same everything that every other family in Michigan is living. We're going through the, are they getting the right education? Are we, how do you pay your property taxes? How do you, when the vehicle breaks down, how are you going to get a new vehicle when the cost of that is skyrocketing? So we're going through all of the same things that every other family in Michigan goes through, and you're gonna get somebody who is gonna fight for those things, right? I always tell people when I was a county commissioner that I made the choice to stay in Vassar and then drive an hour to work every day because I was working at Dow, because that was home and it was that small town feeling. It would have been a lot easier for me to live in Midland and have a 10-minute commute than 100 miles a day in the car. I wanted to make sure that I was creating a place or fighting for a place that someday my kids would have the choice to, and I didn't even have kids yet, but my kids would have the choice to be able to stay there and build their own families. And that's what I'm going to continue fighting for, is making sure this is a place I don't want to have to travel 3 states away to visit my grandkids someday. I want them to have at least the opportunity to stay here. And I think that opportunity comes through less government and better tax code and clean, reliable, affordable energy. And I think clean energy looks like, nuclear and a lot of the new natural gas things. It's not eating up farmland with solar fields.
Yeah. Is there any last words for voters, any message that you want to give them as we wrap this up, or anything that you think people may have misconceptions about you that you'd want to address?
I think one of the things that comes up, and it's not necessarily, it's not a misconception, but one of the things we hear a lot is just no one really knows what's going on in government, or that government is trying to hide what they're doing all the time. And so one of the things that I've been doing for a little over 3.5 years now is at the end of every week, I list every vote that we took in the legislature. Did it pass? How I voted, and then why I voted that way. And I think that that's it's a little thing that I can do, that so much of what we do isn't it isn't in the news. It's usually not in the news unless we had some big huge disagreement, and so a lot of the everyday stuff doesn't get reported, and it's amazing the things that you think you're going to get comments on versus what actually does. And that's one of those things. I'm in the grocery store picking up milk, and somebody, hey, I saw this thing. Thanks for sharing that. Or can you explain that to me a little bit better? And it actually sparks a lot of conversations. But it's almost like it's the least I can do is to keep you informed of what we're doing. And I think though it's one of the ways that really helps let people know what we're actually doing versus sometimes even what gets reported in the news. I mean, I'll read a news article and say, I was there and that is not how I remember that.
Yeah.
And so I think that transparency and that kind of full disclosure of, hey, here's everything we got going on, it goes a long way. And I think building that trust with voters happens by being open and transparent.
Hey, I appreciate your time. I really do.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
All right.